Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of goodwill. Hi, welcome to the Kevin Gregg Show. This is a show that's designed to help you reflect, refresh, rebuild, reinvigorate, reinvent your life according to God's call for your life. So glad to have you here with us today. I've got a wonderful guest that's with us. You've seen me already have some conversations over the last few weeks with Patrick Quinn, but I'd like to take a moment to introduce Amanda Lang. Say hello, Amanda.
Hi.
Hi. Glad to have you here. Let me give you a little background, and then Amanda, you can fill in the gaps where I miss it. Amanda and I, we actually met several years ago. I was one of the directors on a show called Ghost Town Alive that happened at Knott's Berry Farm, and Amanda was one of the amazing actresses that was on this. She was wonderful, and actually, Amanda reached out to me just as the pandemic was starting last year. Right? She's this incredibly creative person. She's got a great heart. She's got two beautiful children that we're going to see during our broadcast because that's how we roll on this show. But Amanda reached out to me just before the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic hit. I sort of went, I sort of ghosted her while everybody was like trying to handle stuff. She just recently reached out to me a couple of months ago and said, "Hey, that conversation that we started." And I went, and the timing of it was amazing because it's right around the time that I started doing this. So Amanda, whatever things that you want to fill in the gap here. I mean, obviously you're a mom, you got two young children. Who's it? It's Michaela and Matthew. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, and one of them just spat up on me, so
That's okay. I told Amanda,
real
it's
life.
okay. I told Amanda before we started, I said, please, we're going to let the kids come in, rock and roll. Cause I know that I've got some viewers on here that are moms that are also creative. And I said, this is going to be, it's going to be amazing to just like experience it. And I always experience this like the way it should be, like at a church with a pastor or a priest. It's like you're really good pastors and priests. Like they totally get it. Like when kids are like, doing their stuff, it's like their version of praising. So we're just going to look at it as this. It's like their versions of trying to like praise and be active and all that. So, Amanda, a couple of things. Can you please give as broad as you can, just sort of an encapsulation of who you are, and then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper as to why you reached out. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you did a pretty good job saying how we met and stuff. But yeah, I first encountered Kevin. He was one of our first directors for Ghost Town Alive, which was one of the most phenomenal acting experiences ever. Actually, any experience I had at Knott's Berry Farm was just off the charts. So very appreciative of my years there. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a Christian home, grew up in a Christian school, and then I started exploring like theater and the arts when I was in college because the denomination of the institution I grew up in,
Sure.
they embrace the arts just a little differently.
Sure.
So, so yeah, but as far as my creativity and such, I've explored anything from music to dance to performing. And I was telling Kevin last week when we were kind of finalizing this, I'm starting to notice some of those things in my daughter. My son, not quite seeing stuff yet because he's a little too young. He's only about 4 months, but my daughter's about 2.5,
Right.
and she's already showing a liking for the arts. And I thought I really want to. My husband and I both, we actually want to foster our kids' interests as much as we can once we start noticing them.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I haven't delved into the arts like I used to. I mean, my audience is very different now. I perform for my kids now with
Right.
playtime and stuff. And so I reached out to Kevin because I thought, I want to keep up my creativity as long as
Of
I'm
course.
raising kids. And I was telling a couple friends and my husband the other day, unfortunately, I do meet mothers, and we'll probably delve into why this happens.
Mhm.
I have met mothers who have admitted to like losing themselves because you get so immersed in raising your children and
Of
being
course.
there for your husband. And I wanted my kids to see what it looks like to have their parents still have their individual interests, but still be invested in them.
Of course. Yes. This
So
is
that
going to
was,
be this is going to be a very it's going to be a very interesting conversation because I've experienced a little bit of this myself as we were raising our kids.
yeah,
And again, this is like we're experimenting with all this, right? Like I'll say this completely up front. I don't have all the answers. I know that there's probably far better resources than myself, but I'm glad that we're at least having the conversation, and good on you for having it in a public forum, because the reason that we do this is I know that there's going to be somebody that's listening to this that goes, that's where I'm at as well, you know? Um,
Yeah.
I just want to ask you just a background question really quick, and you don't have to dive too deep into it. I know that you talked about from the background that you were raised in with the, with the denomination that you were in and the approach to the arts.
Yeah.
Was your pursuit of the art scene as sort of negatively? Did they just want it to be just Christian themed and they just want it to be like worship based, or was there sort of like a negative view that was taken on the arts? And does that still affect you to this day, or how did your family deal with that, or any of that stuff?
I it probably would depend on the source you talk to,
Okay.
because there were people in the denomination, they love the arts, like they were more than happy to cast me in like the church pageants and things like that when they found out I had an interest.
Yeah.
I just don't think, I mean, in recent years it's been a little different, but at the time I was growing up, I don't think the church in general probably had clear boundaries on what to do with the arts.
Sure, of course.
Because when I went to college, I went to a Christian college.
Yeah.
So I had I guess you could call it safe environment to explore the arts as well as my faith at the same time.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if it was just because some churches just might not know how to deal with that yet. And I don't mean
Yeah.
that in a condescending
No, no,
way.
no, no.
I
Yeah.
just mean it as like, some churches might know how to deal with the arts and some just might not be there yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting
Just have
thing,
to get
right?
boundaries.
I think it's something I've definitely been exploring with this, which is like I truly do believe that our skills, gifts, abilities, and talents have been given to us by God for a reason, right? And it's
Yeah.
about bringing in those skills and craftsmanship. Um, and again, I think that sometimes the things that we can produce and put out into the world don't necessarily have to be like hit over the head. It's a Christian story or a Bible story or any of that stuff. But there's something to be said about that craftsmanship and skill being brought into. And I don't know. It's a very interesting thing that you bring up. So thank you for answering me with that. I was a little bit intrigued with that. Um, hey, let's do this specifically, because before we get too much into it, number one, I have to say this. I'm going to give you so much. I'm going to give you kudos and laud you and praise you for what you are doing as a mother. And I think I not only need you to hear this, and I'm sure that you know this, but I also need other people to hear this. Particularly, I have been raised in the last few decades where, the idea of family or motherhood or stay-at-home moms or any of that stuff has been sort of, especially over the last few decades, was given sort of a tinge of just like, oh, that's it. That's all you're doing with your life, or it's boring, or it's this, or it's ho hum. And yet there's been this whole thing of, and especially towards women, and I'm not a woman, so I'm speaking out of turn with this, but like this negative connotation that has been given towards stay-at-home mothers or wives that are working with their husbands. And I just have to tell you, now more than ever, we just need to praise and laud those women that are doing this right now, and just say what an incredibly vital, important role it is that you play. And and even that stuff that you're talking about like just your kids being your main audience right now, it's like, yeah, they're supposed to be your main audience because it's so incredibly vital, because everything that you've had and all of your experiences that you're it's a difference between pouring it into them, which is part of our duty that we have as parents, right? Because what you're doing is you're seeding and you're growing that foundation for what happens for them down the road as they become adults. Um, but it's literally what we're called to do, right? It's literally what
Yeah.
and there's such incredible reward that happens with it. And I think that that's the part of it that doesn't get talked about as much, of like, I've had some really incredible moments with my family and my kids, which I am so, so grateful for. And it's just like an incredible treasure. And and I've done it. I've been on the other side where I have been chasing the thing. I've been chasing the thing that I think that I'm supposed to be doing at times while sacrificing my relationship with my wife and my children. And I just remember, and this literally just popped up in my head, and then we can move on from here. But I remember being at a point, it was right around the time that my son Duncan got his diagnosis with autism. And my wife and
Oh,
I
you
were also
baby.
working, my wife and I were also working with, and you'll probably hear him occasionally. So it's midday as we're recording this. So if you hear me, I take over his room. So as one of my viewers, Doug Riggle, who's awesome, going, you're awesome, you're great. This sure is a distracting background, which is like, yeah, I totally get it. That will ultimately change. Um, uh, but I remember I had this point. My wife and I were we were both acting and performing in a show together with a theater company that we were working on, and we're having people that were coming as we would kind of do this stuff at night, and then we'd have people help out with the kids. And I remember I had this one moment. I'd probably been working like nonstop, doing like non-paid extra theater gigs. And I was probably about a year and a half, maybe a little more into it. And I remember I was about to hit the stage one night, and I knew that my kids were at home, and that the issues that we were dealing with Duncan and the pressures that we were putting on our older son Luke to help out. And I remember just having this moment where I just went, this is not right. I need to stop this. Like I need to be home with my boys. We need to figure out something else on the other side. And I remember having the conversation with my wife, Kate, and just really making that decision to go, hey, this is great. Like all of this theater stuff that we're doing on the side, which is kind of fulfilling, but the trade-off is too big for me. And I'm really glad that I kind of made that decision where I said, I need to stop pursuing that so that God could have me just kind of go, I need you back at home with your boys right now and putting your time and your energy into them, you know? And I think it's paid off. I don't know. They could say otherwise, but you know. So, um, a couple of things.
Yeah.
I asked you to answer a few questions, which I was actually reviewing. We don't have to do it word for word, but boy, there were a couple of things that you answered on some questions that I sent to you about what you see the future being like for yourself over the next several years. And
Mhm.
and can you share what can you share right on, man, you got a party. Look, that's right, man. That's look, he's what do you mean he's not singing? He's absolutely
Right?
singing, right?
I know. I stand corrected, my boy.
Oh, let's talk about this for just a second before we
Yes.
get into it. We were just
Yeah,
talking
absolutely.
before this beforehand. You were saying that you've had a million things that were thrown at you over the last day before we ended up having this conversation today. Let's talk about this.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I admitted to you when we first logged in, I said, I'll tell you what, Kevin, I said, the enemy did not want me here today because I had a day yesterday. So, and my husband knows this. He and I talked about it yesterday. I cannot tell you just, it's, it's almost like, oh gosh, my husband puts it so well.
Hmm.
You just wake up and you think you feel okay. Like yesterday I woke up and I thought, oh my gosh, I love Mondays. I couldn't stand Mondays when I was in school because it meant another week of homework and assignments. And now as a wife and mom, I love Mondays because I'm like, oh, it's a fresh week to get that quality time in, get those chores done, do A, B, C, X, Y, X, Y, Z.
Right.
Okay, you dropped it again. And yesterday I just could not snap out of it. I felt weighted, like heavy, like just walking around the house felt it just felt like pressure, like lifting my arms up to get a cup out of the cupboard or
Yeah.
something. Everything was just, it felt like a chore. It almost felt like
Yeah.
you were sick. And
You're
which is so funny because
you're almost describing my wife's day yesterday. You really are.
oh, she and I were probably on the same wavelength, but I'm also reading Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer, which I told my
Oh
husband
yeah.
should be required reading for everybody. It is taking
Okay.
me forever to get through that book because every time I read a chapter in that book, I have a challenging day like I did yesterday.
Wow.
And what that tells me is that, because she's really good at pointing out in the book thinking patterns that are not healthy, that can lead to destruction, that the enemy wants you to stay rooted in. Yeah. And I was reading the chapter yesterday. She has a very long chapter centered around what Christ's mind would be like. Okay. And I was finishing that chapter yesterday, and as soon as I took my notes on it, I thought, okay, I'm probably going to get hit pretty hard. Well, I didn't think I was going to get hit that fast.
Wow.
And like, I remember calling my husband up on one of his breaks, and all of a sudden I just burst into tears. I'm like, I am having such a hard time today. Yeah. And it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. It just feels like, how does my husband put it? It just kind of feels like a brain fog that you can't find your way out of.
Yes.
And like nothing else checks off. Like you're not stressed about anything in particular. You're not, what is it, baby? Do you need a snack? Okay, hang on a second.
You got it.
One thing I didn't have prepared.
That's okay. If you got to get the snacks, you got to get the snacks, and you can still keep talking because we can also hear you. Because I've also got a few ideas on this too. Like Amanda, what you are literally describing as that brain fog.
I'm listening. I'll be right back.
No worries. What you described as that brain fog was literally exactly what I was praying about with Kate last night. Wow. Because she was sort of experiencing the exact same thing yesterday. It was a little more in depth, and I don't think that she minds me sharing this, but Sunday was Father's Day, and she lost her father. She lost her father a couple of years ago, and even though we were celebrating part of it and hanging out, but it's like that. Those waves of emotions happen to come in, it's like that. It's like those delayed waves of grief, right?
Yeah.
So
I lost my father when I was about 19, so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. So here you are. So you're so totally, and please, let's point something out for a second. Here you're listening. I'm saying this specifically to our viewers, but here you're talking about a woman who is like, she actively has this mindset of when she's approaching the brand new week where she's going, great, let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. And everything seems to be like set up for success and it's going to be great. And then she suddenly gets just blindsided by this feeling, Is there a way that you sort of processed it or came out the other side of it?
I do my best to read my Bible early in the morning. I'm up at 4 a.m. on weekdays just because it's a few minutes where I can see my husband before he heads off to work for the day. Mm-hmm. And that's also my chance to read my Bible and do some journaling. And I was able to do it yesterday. And so I had to remind myself during those challenging moments that God was in control. I'm not, no matter how hard I might try. It's much better when he's in control. And so it was one of those days where I just kind of like mentally prayed, okay, God, please take it because I can't handle it. And I just kind of had to push through the day.
Yeah.
I just had to push through the day because there were still two children that needed me. Mm-hmm. And they don't know exactly what's going on in between the ears, but the kids will pick up on tension and anxiety that you're feeling. And I did call my mother. She did pray over me because I told her, I'm just having a really hard time. I don't know why, because I was like, I'm not having a bad day. It was just a hard time.
Yeah.
There's hardly any other way to describe it. So depending on what's going on with the rest of the day, it might affect how I process it. Like there might be other times where, like if it's a weekend and my husband is home, I'll tell him, I just need 20 minutes to myself, and I'll journal, I'll pray, I'll do something to kind of process it. But on a weekday like yesterday where he's at work and I'm with the kids, I just distract myself by pushing through it.
Yeah.
And I will say prayers throughout the day. Like a few times I called out to God, like, God, I don't know why you're seeing me worthy to be tested today, but there's obviously a reason.
That's amazing. I just want to say a couple of things, especially for such incredible techniques that what Amanda just shared with us, right? Which is like, number one, this is why I'm grateful for things like, for example, the Bible app. Like the Bible app is one of those things where I go on there and I'll happen to bookmark things or see different Bible plans. And it's so important, whether you're doing this with the Bible, whether you're doing this with Christian literature, whether you're doing it with other literature that also sort of edifies you and strengthens you. When you come across something that really hits you and really speaks to you, especially when you're in the good moments, to bookmark that or to copy it or to write it down and to have it somewhere accessible. Because when you're in the middle of it and it hits you, you're not going to think of it. I know that I'm not. I specifically have like a bookmark thing that's on my Bible app, and I have them like listed by, anxiety, pressure, sadness, business, any of that
Oh,
stuff.
that's a good idea.
Yeah. So when I can't think, when I'm feeling a certain way, I can look up certain categories. And then next thing I know, I'm seeing the scripture that specifically deals with that, because I'm not going to remember in the moment. I'm just not. And the other thing that Amanda did here too, which was she was also able to have that conversation with her mom. So a couple of things, right? Leaning on scripture when possible and praying, literally calling out. David does this in the Psalms, right? Like people people think, oh yeah, the Christian journey is all about like puppies and unicorns. It's like, no, are you kidding? There's wailing and gnashing of teeth and people like complaining and just like going, why am I going through this? And like God can take it, right? Like God wants you to bring like the deepest, hardest things that you're going through. And then the other thing that she did in this, which is also not to, she did get a little bit of time alone. She's able to do it with her husband. Your husband's name is Kevin. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
great name, right?
Not bad. Kind and gentle one. That's what it's called. That's what the definition of it. But able to kind of like pass the kids off to Kevin for a little bit so she can get a little bit of her own alone time for a bit. But then also reaching out to her mom and having a conversation. So, I mean, just all of those incredibly useful tactics that she just described, just in that prayer, crying out to God, getting some of that time alone and to remove yourself from it, and then also reaching out to another person so that you're not isolating, right? And it's a hard thing, especially with our spouses, right? I used to get into this routine where it's a differentiation between, I was terrible with this for years. I used to come home and just have like really hard days, and I would just dump all of it on Kate. And Kate is she's beautiful, but she's such an empath. And so like next thing you know, she'd just be a sponge for the stuff and couldn't do it. And I suddenly started realizing like, oh, uh, I can't do this to her, right? Or like the thing that you're talking about with your kids. It's like going, I've got to be a mom here for my kids for a second. I can't take this out on them while they're going through this in the middle of this. I got to figure out a way to negotiate this and to do it. So a lot of stuff. So here's the big question. Um, you talked to me about some stuff that you sort of see for yourself and your family over the next several years, and I'm just kind of hoping that you would kind of reiterate some of those ideas. If not, I'll be more than happy to read them to you, but I think that I want you to say them out loud because, number one, I think they're so amazing and right on the nose, and I guess it's something else for you to just like vocalize it, and also have it on a version where it's kind of record for yourself,
Yeah.
you know
Well, which one should I start with? Because I remember what I wrote. I just want to make sure I'm saying the right ones.
Whatever something that's just sort of coming up on your mind and your heart. So if I were to just ask you the general
Oh,
question
goodness.
of like, what are you seeing happening for yourself and your family over the next few years?
Oh, goodness. My husband and I even talked about this before we got married. We want to teach our children at home.
Yeah.
And neither of us have a teaching credential. We don't have teaching degrees, but we both have strengths that we can play off of each other. Like he's very good at math. He's very good at numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I would not say I'm terrible at it, but it's not my idea of a fun subject.
Sure.
I'm more of like the language arts and some branches of science and history and, the arts, of course. But we love the thought of having our little ones at home so we can really pay attention to what interests them. And if they need more help, we can take our time with it.
Yes.
And one of my biggest dreams with that is we have a camping trailer that we use for camping or glamping, however you want to put it.
Oh, really?
And if there was a place in the continental US, at least,
Yes.
that
Yes.
interested them, I would love for us to be able to take road trips out there so
Oh
they can
my
see it.
gosh, that'd be amazing.
That is
Oh,
one of my biggest dreams for our kids.
you guys are living like our best life, like the type of stuff that we would love to do, man. Oh my gosh. How awesome is that? I have to tell you this too, like as much as people, I have met so many, I've met so many homeschooling parents over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I've been so impressed with them. I'm so impressed. I wish that we'd had the opportunity to do it ourselves. We were a little bit more challenged. Uh, but I will tell you, I have met some of the most intelligent young men and women who have come up through this. You know, the stereotype of this is like, oh, they're not socialized or they don't know their stuff. There's a friend of mine that I know, Craig Smith, that I knew through Disneyland. He introduced me to these speech and debate tournaments that these homeschooled students do at, oh my gosh, it's a Christian university that's down in Irvine that I've completely forgotten what the name
Is
of
it
it is.
Concordia or is
Yep,
it?
Concordia University. So I've been there a couple of times to be there for their speech and debate tournaments that they've done over the years. I'll tell you some of the most intelligent young men and women, Craig Smith and also David Schmus, who does a lot of stuff on a national level with that. But wow, there's some pretty powerful young men and women. And also when you think about just like what the general education system is, you know, our general education system, and again, this is not against anyone else that's in structured schooling things. This is just an observation. It is not a judgment call at all. A lot of the current schooling systems that we have were sort of based on, especially in the last 100 years or so, they were sort of based on like an industrial age model, which was like, hey, how do we get kids to start learning? You know, you show up at a building, you know, for such and such hours, you have these breaks or whatever, you learn how to, you know, how to deal with your authority or structure, or any of this stuff. And it's kind of the same model that you would be using in a factory, like manufacturing. So you're basically teaching an entire, you know, generation of students to just do, okay, I just listen to what I'm told and I try to be the best version of that, you know? So anyway, I think that sort of homeschooling gives you a little bit more ability and freedom with that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing vision.
Well, and the funny, thank you. And the funny thing is, I didn't really embrace the homeschooling until my husband Kevin and I were dating, because I'll admit it, it was because I didn't really know a whole lot about it.
Hmm.
And then the more I delved into it, and I actually met a lot of homeschooling families when I worked at Knott's.
Yeah.
And I would ask them questions, and I was just blown away by the stuff that they could do at
Yes.
home. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I love that idea. You love my hair right now, don't you? So that was
Right
a
on.
big why. And
Hey,
yeah.
let's explore some of this for a second, Amanda. So
Sure.
I like this idea that you're talking about, like, you know, you've been watching Michaela, or you've been seeing some of her creative interests.
Yeah.
And part of it is like you're trying to figure out, well, I want to see what her interests are. But I think that there was something even more powerful you said, which was the idea of observing you doing some of your creative stuff. I mean, in a way, what you're doing is you're kind of modeling it, right? I think that that's something that I have definitely done with my sons over the years, right? For example, I can hear right now my son's in the other room working on his music, right? Because he's a guy that always like sort of watched me. And the one thing that I always said to my kids was, listen, I came from an environment that was very wary of the arts for a number of reasons, right? Like they were afraid I was going to get like completely corrupted, or I get
Yeah.
that, right? Like in the current media thing, it's like afraid I'd become a sex addict or a drug addict or whatever it is, you know, and
Yeah, that's
believe
kind
me,
of across the board still, I've found out.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and listen, it's not like
The
it's not
concern, not the results. Sorry.
and right. And it's not like that people aren't susceptible to that, and that can happen, right? Like you can lose a little bit of your moral grounding and footwork if you're not wary. But I remember getting into this industry, my parents being so concerned with it. But as I started doing it and my kids were watching me, and then my son came to me and said, I think I want to be a musician. For me, I almost felt like being a musician was even harder than being an actor or director. But who was I to say no to them, right? Who was I to say no to them? The main thing that the main thing that I would always tell them was like, just, you have to do your work. Like, you have to do your work. And can I say this also about arts just for a second, which gets so glossed over? And right now, we're in the middle of a conversation that is living proof of this and stuff that I've been seeing outside. The arts are such an important foundational part also of our society as well, because it also helps us to learn and express some of the fundamental things that we go through in our human experience, right?
Yeah, that's
Like,
very
how many times do we get educational things across through storytelling or being able to share different experiences that we've had? And even now, even as we're having this Zoom meeting, how many times have I been in things where you have people that have just been terrified to be on camera, or they don't know how to like genuinely interact with people that they're having a conversation with? That again, the arts and practicing in the arts, which used to be incorporated into all of our schooling. I mean, I remember this. Like, I'd be taking piano lessons, or you'd be singing in the choir, you'd be doing a show for school, and it wasn't the idea that you were going to go into that for your life. It was just seen as another part of your education, that you just say, bring this in, have this in your wheelhouse. So all of that to say, what are some of the things that you've been interested in kind of doing or pursuing or practicing yourself that
Mhm.
you hope that would serve as a model for right now, Michaela, as the example?
Well, for one thing, I took oh gosh, words are hard. I took piano lessons for about 7 years.
Mhm.
From the time I was about 7 years old up until I was in high school. I basically had to choose between piano lessons and sports.
Sure.
And that was a very hard decision, but high school would never happen again. So I went for the sports, and that served me later. I'll get to why in a minute.
Sure.
But yeah, I did the piano lessons for a while, and when my husband and I started dating, one of the first things I noticed he had in his house, well, our house now, he has a piano. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Because he found out I had been playing, and he actually managed to teach himself. So that alone is going to be interesting once we all start playing.
Right.
And I did play the piano a few times. Like, I tried a few notes and stuff, because I haven't touched a piano as much as I used to in many years. I'm getting there.
Okay.
I played the piano a few times when I was pregnant with my daughter, and then we will plink on the keys a little bit. It's in need of some tuning, but she doesn't care right now, so it's fine with me.
Of course. Of course.
And she loves the music. She loves hitting the keys, so music might be in there somewhere. And if there's music playing anywhere, whether it's a theme song for a show or a film, or when we have been at amusement parks or church and there's music playing, she's already dancing.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
I love
And
that.
I didn't dance until I was in college, but I did enjoy it. So I'm trying to find avenues of where I can kind of pick those interests up again. So that way I can, might sound a little boastful, but I'll say it anyway. That way I can kind of be like her first mentor in a way.
I love that. I love that. Right. I
Yeah.
think part of that too is, right, I think you have the wonderful opportunity, especially with Michaela, to gosh, man, for almost, boy, talk about a true, like, mother-daughter bonding experience, is to kind of go, hey, what's interesting, what's kind of interesting both of us, you know what I mean? Like, something that we can kind of learn together or to have fun, right?
Mhm.
Because what's the thing, like, that, whatever that art is, whether it's piano or dancing or painting or whatever that stuff is,
Yeah.
it's a thing that helps us sort of build the relationship with each other,
Mhm.
right? And to kind of have a few laughs and to have these moments of like, great, right?
Yeah.
Because you're probably going to be, there's a good chance that you may be on the same level with some of the stuff as you're
Right.
doing it. I don't know, right? Which would be kind of neat. But
Yeah.
there is something so powerful that happens with our children that they start kind of modeling, that they kind of start modeling that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's nice.
Which of those things do you think is, if just off the top of your head, what's one of those things that you seem to be leaning more towards? Do you know, or you're still in,
For
you're
her
still
or
in,
for me?
let's talk for you first, because I think that that would be the thing. Because I've got a funny feeling, like I've got a very strong feeling that if there's something that you find an interest in, um, I don't think it's gonna, I don't think it's gonna be, I don't think it's gonna negatively impact her. I think there's gonna be a part of her that she's gonna kind of like want to follow along and be a part of it. Um, and then that will also give you an idea of how she's thinking or processing. And then you're also going to be able to pick up on, like, if she doesn't want to do it, okay, she doesn't want to do it. That's fine.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think for me it's the piano because I miss it, but I also enjoy writing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because going kind of calling back what we were talking about earlier, most of the time when I'm having my alone time, either in the morning or if I have to take those 10-20 minutes to myself, I'm doing some kind of writing,
Yeah.
where there's journaling or I'm writing out my prayer. So that
Yeah.
way I remember to say it later. I'm writing out a scripture verse I'm working on memorizing. And writing was something I enjoyed growing up. Like I was one of those weird students who really didn't mind writing the essays or the research papers. I actually enjoyed that.
Good for you. That's amazing.
So I would say the piano playing and the writing is something I'm leaning more towards for my creative outlet right now, because the acting I kind of do on its own every day
Of course.
anyway.
Of course.
So yeah.
Yeah. I totally get that. I used to be like, that was my biggest thing. Like, I used to think that it was like acting for me for a long time. And then it was like, after a while, I just kind of went, this isn't, this doesn't float my boat. I mean, I can do it. Like I can do it and I'm grateful to do it. I always like the creating side of things. I always like the kind of like building the stuff and putting the stuff together. I'd always get very excited of like, I always loved the rehearsal process of putting stuff together and trying to figure out and workshop. And then we kind of get it up and then we'd be performing.
Oh, and that
And
show during the Ghost Town Alive rehearsals, that was, talk about a rehearsal process. Oh my goodness.
God bless you. God bless all of you guys for getting through that. Oh, I've got many insights, personal insights about that, it could be a whole show itself. But
Yeah.
I will say my absolutely so impressed and just so grateful for all of you guys, because I get it, because I have done it myself, right? But I usually get to the point, like after I'd done something for a couple of weeks and something was up and running, then I kind of go, okay, what's the next thing, right?
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
just be like, okay, what's the next project that we're going to work on and build from the ground up and do that. So um yeah, so this is pretty fascinating. I really like the idea of that writing stuff. And again, this is all stuff I want to say this, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, honoring exactly where you are right now, exactly where you are as a mom, as a wife, being there, being in this moment, also knowing that you work on the side, doing other stuff, you're juggling all these things, these great, you do these great little Instagram videos as well too, which are
Oh,
awesome. And I want to continue encouraging you doing that. I think that those are amazing, right?
oh, thank you.
So like your life
Very much
already,
beginner still for
that's
any other moms
okay.
watching. Yeah.
But
I just
that's
don't want them to think that, oh my goodness, she's doing that too. I'm still very much a beginner.
no. Like, look, well, this is the wonderful thing, right? Like, and this is part of the stuff that uh, some areas that you can explore with your writing or whatever that is. But like, I always look at whatever we're doing with our art. I always use the phrase about like, when possible and when appropriate, practicing in public, right? Like
Yeah.
practicing in public, which is not, this is not about like showing off or like saying, look how amazing I am, right? It's this idea of being an example to other people, of like going, hey, this isn't perfect. And I'm just trying to put this out and trying to help other people that might be a little bit further back than me. Um, and occasionally we have these other projects that we want to put certain things to the side to make sure that we really get like a nice polish on them and make sure that it looks like it's best.
Yeah.
Um, But I think that that's something just sort of popped in my heart and my mind just as we're talking, which is like, truly, Amanda, that you do have the opportunity, and again, not something that you have to do, but just a thought to put in the back of your mind,
Yeah.
is as you are doing this, because there can never be enough examples of people living the life that you are living right now, or what I'm trying to do, living the life that I'm doing. I mean, we need so many. I was just talking about this the other day on the show. Like, literally all of us are called to the Great Commission, right? Just before Jesus ascends to heaven, he just like tells the apostles, go out and spread this good news to all the world in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Like, that's our job. And sometimes we're like trying to figure out, like, how do I do this? How do I witness, right? And sometimes witnessing is just about like living our life and living it with love, strength, example, which is what you're doing in your family right now. And so those moments, and again, this is something that you would have to consult with Kevin, and making sure that everything's right. But those moments of going, is there something that I'm going through right now, or as I'm journaling, or as I'm keeping track of this, is this a potential book that I'm sharing with other mothers that are going through this right now? Or is there a potential posting thing or something that I also incorporate with these videos I'm kind of goofing around with, right? Like, we can speak in several voices. This is an example that I give to this is an example that I give to potential people that want to either podcast or write or blog or whatever. And I get this from Michael Hyatt, who does a lot of online stuff. But it's the idea that we're speaking in three different voices, right? You can either speak as being the wizened old Gandalf, the wizard that's been through it all, and you're basically saying, well, I've been through it, and here's how you get there. You can talk as like Aragorn, who's like, he's on the road, he's in it, he's fighting, he's doing the battle, and he's showing you do. Or we can speak as the person that's just starting out, like Frodo, who's just like going, I'm not sure what I'm doing, and I'm trying to figure this out as I go, and follow me along as I do this journey, right? And you may have the opportunity of being sort of a little bit in that middle place, where you're a little bit on that Frodo side or that Aragorn side, where you get to like say, hey, other moms that are doing it, and hey, I know what the culture is telling us. The culture is telling us, oh, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you've given up, you've given it all up. You've given up your sense of identity, or you've given up your arts, or you're all this other stuff, and this is a way to go. Are you kidding? I'm like I'm living this beautiful, incredible life. And here's examples of how this is working for me. So I guess I just want to say that because, and again, I'm speaking as a 49-year-old guy. I'm sure that the internet is awash with, moms that are doing it, but nobody's doing it like you. Nobody's doing it the way that you would do it, or nobody's doing it the way that you would do it with your experiences and what you went through, or have gone through. So
Yeah.
I just want to say that I don't know if that resonates, or if you just kind of get off this call and go, what was he talking about in that
No,
show?
it totally resonates because, like you said, it's funny because I was kind of discussing something similar with my husband the other day. I told him no matter how good of a job a mom is doing, she just needs to be surrounded with reminders
Hmm.
on what she is doing, because especially I've noticed when the children are small, I mean, they express their thanks and love in many different ways, but verbally is not what they do right away.
Mm-mm.
And so I think that can leave some moms feeling unnoticed or just unheard.
Hmm.
And I think that's what can be beautiful about different platforms that mothers, whether they're work at home, work outside the home, or stay at home mothers, they just need some kind of outlet. So yeah, that totally resonates with me. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I just have to say that too. I just had this flash that just kind of came in my mind. When
Okay.
I went through the when my son Duncan was getting diagnosed with his autism, at first we thought maybe he was deaf because he wasn't responding to certain things, or it was very strange. Like, it was very strange. Like, our son Duncan, like, he developed normally all the way until he was about a year and a half, and then well, I've got other things on that, which will get me booted off YouTube. But you know, I believe that there were certain things that I think that helped to lead towards his autism. Some people in the scientific community would say, "How dare you?" But uh, look it up. So anyway, uh, I think that there were some things that led to, because I literally saw like his normal growth, and then just almost about 18 months, almost 2 years, just saw it like go, just like disappear. It was the weirdest thing. Like see like language disappear and all this stuff is so strange. I remember where at one point, especially he started getting to like 3.5, 4 years of age. And I have described this, and this is not, in no way is this meant as disparaging towards my son at all. My youngest son now is 22. And there have definitely been at times when Duncan has certain behaviors or things that pop up. It can be like a tantruming 2-year-old. It can be like that can happen. And like I've had even during some of my worst periods with him, I've told people in my men's group where I've said, it's been kind of like, at times it's been like raising a tantruming 2-year-old for over 20 years. You know what I mean? Like that at times, it's not all the time, but when that happens, it's just like you go, when's he going to get out of this? Like that. And so dealing with that for 2 decades. Now, here's the insight that I have, which comes back full circle to what you talked about and the season that you're in right now. I remember when he was 3 and 4, and when his behaviors and all this stuff were at the worst. And I mean, we're talking like, coming out naked, like turning on burners in the middle of the night, standing up on top of like, bookcases with a kitchen knife in his hand, like crazy stuff. And the verbalization just wasn't there. Like it was gone, and we're trying to do it. And just like, I would just like tell him that I just loved him. And I knew that I was showing him that I loved him and all this stuff. And I had this thing that popped up in my mind, and I went, oh my gosh, this is my relationship with God. This is my relationship with God. God is continually telling me that I love you, that I love you, that I care for you so much. And I'm the tantruming kid that can't, I'm the tantruming kid that can't express it, But eventually, and I know that I see this, right? I know that I see this as I see it with his development, everything. And I guess the big thing that I want to tell you, Amanda, is this stuff, and you've experienced this with your kids, right? Like all of this stuff that you're doing, it's going to pay off. Like it's going to pay off. This investment that you're doing, that you and Kevin are doing right now, and the stuff that you're trying to do right now, and even you trying to stretch out and do the stuff with the arts, that's the stuff that's going to pay off. Where eventually they are going to get to a point of saying, thank you, Mom, thank you, Dad, for that love and that insight and all that stuff that you put into us. So that's where the payoff is.
Yeah.
The end.
Oh, that was beautiful. I could listen to that all day. That was beautiful.
I know. Let's do this with a little bit of our time that we have again. And if you feel like having one more of these conversations, I'm so open to it. So I
Oh,
don't know,
absolutely.
depending on
Especially
what's.
if it's going to help other mothers, especially if other mothers want us to have these conversations. I'm totally down for
I
it.
love it. And can you do me a favor for those people that are watching this? Can you do me a favor if you were watching this and there's something that just resonates with what Amanda is going through or the other stuff that you're going through? Can you do us a favor? Can you just like write in the comments, like maybe share part of your experience or the stuff that you've gone through. I'll jump on, I'll respond. I'm sure Amanda will get in there, and it will help guide us for future conversations that we have. So let me ask you this. From where you are right now, what do you think what would you like to be, or what do you feel like you're being prompted to do as sort of your next step when you think like, I think I want to explore something art wise? You've obviously talked about piano stuff. You still have the piano in the house?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We
And
do.
have
And
you guys, and
I still have my music books from when I was a kid.
I love that. And have you had, and I know it's crazy with everything else that's going on, right? So please, I'm speaking to you as a 49-year-old man that is so removed from this season right now. But have you started plunking out any of that music around Michaela or anything like that? Or?
Not for a few months,
Sure.
but every now and then we have. I did do a post about a book I read called The 12-Week Year. So every 12 weeks, you tackle about 2 or 3 different goals. And the piano playing is actually going to be on my next year, quote unquote, that I do. I'm in my, because the way that approach works is,
Okay. I
not
can't,
my,
I
it's
want
not,
to hear this so much. Like, this
yeah,
is the
it's
whole
not,
thing. I
it's,
just want to say, tell us.
let me just put a disclaimer. This is not my book. This is
Okay.
not a way to infringe on the author at all. This
Sure.
is just a book that has been life-changing. So the way it works is you take 12 weeks. Every 12 weeks, you come up with 3 new goals, and they have like 7 different areas of your life, whether it's communication, physical health, your spirituality. They have like 7 different areas that they list.
Okay.
And you just write down the biggest goal that you want to do in each of those areas, and you come up with, they call them tactics. So it's just like mini steps that you can take. So I'm in my 2nd year right now. And one of those goals right now is my prayer life, because I want it to be a little bit more intense and intentional, especially as we're raising children.
Yeah.
And so I'm on week 10 for that year. So in about another 3 weeks, I'll be starting a new quote unquote year.
Okay.
And the piano playing was something I did want to put into that next year. So
Okay. That's wonderful.
yeah.
Could we do something if possible? Like
Okay.
when we chat next time, and it may be like when we do this, when we schedule again and do it, would you mind like sharing like part of what that, as much as you feel comfortable, but like
Yeah.
what that plan of attack looks like for you
Oh,
if you do it?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
I think that that would be such an incredible thing. Because I think it'd be an incredible thing for me, and it'd also be an incredible thing for, especially for moms that are out there. They're listening to this, like going, "How is she doing this? How
Oh
the
my.
heck is she trying to figure? How is she fitting this in with everything?" Right?
I'll tell you something, Kevin. It's really helped me to, and I've tried different goal systems, and they might work for other people.
Okay.
But I told my husband what I find so frustrating, and it's nothing against anybody who comes up with these systems. A lot of systems I don't think are made with mothers in mind.
No.
That might just be an outrageous claim on my part, but that's the feeling I get, because
Yes.
other books that I've read or other systems that have been presented to me, I'm like, yeah, I could see that working for like maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah. Totally.
And this one I've been able to do ever since January of this year.
Wow. I listen, I'm absolutely fascinated and intrigued
Yeah.
with this. Because I will tell, because for me, like honestly, it's one of these things. you, you might be speaking my language, sister, because it's like I honestly feel like between trying to do, I'm doing at home work, or my wife had knee surgery
Oh, bless
this
her heart.
last year, right? So was doing that, plus trying to navigate this stuff with Duncan, plus trying to figure out like what's his next steps after he's leaving the schooling system, like going into like, work programs and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat as you, where I just feel like I've got all of this stuff and I just go, how the heck do I do this? Including finding time to connect with my wife, connect with my children connect with my sons in a relational way, making sure that I'm getting an actual Sabbath, making sure that I'm getting that rest and that refreshment that I need while
Oh
doing
my
all this.
gosh. Getting an actual Sabbath, that is a wonderful goal, because oh, our culture does not always encourage that.
No, it does not. I will tell you that that's been the biggest eye opener for me, especially over the last, I'd say 6, 7, 8 years, is like this realization of like, there were some people in my life that I used to admire. They go 7 days a week. There'd be people who only get like 3.5, 4 hours of sleep, and they could just go and go and
Oh,
go. And, you just go, wow. And I was impressed with them. And then after a while I went, oh, that's insane. Like maybe you might have that biochemical makeup. Maybe God made you that way. He didn't make me that way. There's no way I can do that. If I do that, I'm heading for a heart attack and a stroke. No doubt. No doubt. So, Amanda, I'm very intrigued with this. So let's you and I maybe shoot a couple emails back and forth, but I would love to get you back on next time and have you talk to us about your 12-week thing. And what you're, and listen, we get this, right? Like, we're making the disclaimer up front. Amanda's not the expert in this, right? But she happens to be, what does she happen to be in this? She happens to be Frodo. She happens to be Frodo that's going off on her journey. I'm such a nerd right now, right? Like, people are going, enough with the Lord of the Rings stuff, Kevin. And to your point, can I say this?
Yeah.
I have seen that so many times with other systems, where I've seen that with other time management systems or goal systems. And a couple of these things always come back to, well, if you're a parent, you might be in a season where this doesn't apply to you. And it really is like going, so how does this work for parents that are in the middle of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I would be fascinated to follow you with this. So let's shoot some emails back and forth. It'll probably be a few weeks from now when we come back together and touch on this, but I would love to hear what your stuff is. Heck, I might join you on it, sister. I don't know,
Awesome.
it could definitely help, amazing. Any other parting things on, or time's short, because I've got to run off this stuff, and you're obviously juggling the kids. Any other things that are on your heart that you would like to share with our listeners that we're watching today?
Oh my gosh. I would love to share a lot, but before we're tempted to go off on other tangents, all I can say is no matter what your situation is, whether you are a parent or a caregiver, whatever it is you're pursuing, please just know you are doing the best job that you can. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was I was being so hard on myself when I was first pursuing my dreams. And my mother said, well, what would you say to someone who is in your exact position? And I said, well, I would tell them that they're doing the best they can. And she said, well, then why are you not being that nice to yourself?
Wow. So
I was like, okay. And my husband's even done that too. He's like, well, sweetie, don't look at what you're not doing. Look at what you are doing. Look at what you have done. Look at what you're being present for today, or whatever happens to be my issue that day.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. That's so good. I was just talking about this yesterday with some family, where I was just saying the things that I say to myself on a regular basis, I would never say to another human being. I'm so hard. I'm so hard. I'm so hard on myself. And it's just like, that's not God. That's not God. That's literally Satan coming
probably
in.
one of the reasons why I got attacked yesterday too, because now that I know that my kids are watching, like if some of the stuff I'm saying to myself, like say if I was standing in front of a mirror, my daughter is watching what I'm saying to myself. I'm teaching her how to talk to herself and to other people. Ooh. So what do I want to hear come out of her mouth?
Yeah.
I mean, she's still forming her words. She's not talking full on sentences yet or anything, because she's only 2.5, but her words are getting more pronounced.
Yeah.
And they are our greatest imitators.
Powerful stuff. Amanda, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we had this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Such a blessing. Such a blessing.
Asleep.
Well, I have that effect on people. I put them to sleep.
No, so, that's not what I meant.
I think so. I think that's exactly what I meant. A pleasure touching base with you. And I can't wait to have our follow-up conversation. I'm just so glad that we were to have this. For those of you that are watching, thank you so much for joining us. If you like this video, please like, subscribe. If you know someone that's going through this, do me a favor. Could you copy the URL and send this in an email to someone so they can watch this video and they can follow more of the stuff that we're doing here at the Kevin Gregg Show. Just trying to help people out according to God's call for your life. So Amanda, a huge blessing. Can't wait for our next conversation. Just a true joy. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, everybody. That's it. I'm going to end this, but we will see you next time. God bless everybody. We'll see you later. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, gang.